January 23, 2026. At 0347 hours, something extraordinary is unfolding across two continents. While Russian military leadership scrambles to redeploy forces thousands of kilometers north to Greenland, Ukrainian operators are about to execute one of the most devastating precision strikes of the war. The target? A critical Russian radar installation and airbase in occupied Crimea. The Russians have no idea what's coming. In Moscow, senior commanders face an impossible dilemma. President Trump's aggressive posturing toward Greenland has forced NATO allies to deploy troops to the Arctic territory. Denmark, Germany, France, Norway, and Sweden are coordinating the largest Arctic military exercise in decades. Russia, anxious about its northern flank and determined to protect its vast network of Arctic installations, is pulling critical air defense units away from occupied Ukraine. This is exactly what Ukrainian intelligence has been waiting for. The redeployment began 72 hours earlier. 3 S-400 batteries stationed near Sevastopol received urgent orders to prepare for Arctic deployment. 2 Pantsir S-1 systems protecting the 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙨 air base were scheduled for relocation within 48 hours. Elite electronic warfare units operating the sophisticated Krasuka 4 systems in Crimea were being reassigned to Russia's northern military district. For Ukrainian military planners, this created a window of vulnerability that would last approximately 96 hours. The old systems were being deactivated and prepared for transport. The replacement systems hadn't arrived yet. Crimea's multi-layered air defense network, normally impenetrable, now had critical gaps. At Ukraine's Special Operations Command, mission planning had been underway for weeks. The target list was ambitious. The Podlyot radar station near 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙞𝙝, the Saki Air Base with its nuclear-capable aviation, the 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙞𝙝 Base Operations Center, and fuel storage facilities supporting Russia's Black Sea operations. But executing simultaneous strikes across occupied Crimea, while Russian attention was diverted to Greenland, required perfect timing and unprecedented coordination. The drones launched at different times from multiple locations. 12 𝙄𝙤𝙤𝙤 Beaver long-range strike drones departed from southern Ukraine at 23:15 hours on January 22nd. 8 modified 𝙄𝙤-22 airborne tactical drones lifted off at 100 hours. 4 specialized electronic warfare drones equipped with corner reflectors and advanced jamming systems launched at 2:30 hours. Each group had specific targets and precisely calculated flight paths. The total distance covered would exceed 1,400 kilometers. Flight time, between 3.5 and 5.2 hours, depending on payload and wind conditions. Every drone was expendable. Every target was critical. The first challenge came 140 kilometers into the mission. A Russian early warning radar stationed in occupied Kherson Oblast detected anomalous contacts moving south at 180 kilometers per hour. The operator studied his screen with growing concern. The radar cross-section was tiny, barely 0.08 square meters, but the flight pattern was deliberate. He reached for the encrypted radio to alert Crimean air defenses, but the signal never transmitted. Ukrainian cyber warfare specialists had been inside the communications network for 17 days. The moment his transmission began, an automated protocol rerouted it through a loop, sending his alert back to his own station. His warning message arrived at his own computer, marked as received and acknowledged. He would spend the next 4 hours believing Crimea had been notified. Meanwhile, the lead group of Beavers was approaching the northern edge of Crimea's air defense umbrella. Under normal circumstances, this airspace was protected by overlapping coverage from 4 S-400 batteries, 3 Pantsir S-1 systems, and 2 Tor M2 mobile units. But normal circumstances no longer applied. The S-400 battery that should have been scanning this sector was currently being loaded onto transport vehicles, its radar systems powered down and disconnected. The Pantsir S-1 that covered the western approach had already departed for Arctic deployment 18 hours earlier. Only the Tor M2 systems remained operational, and their radar operators were tracking what they believed was a flock of migrating birds. At exactly 03:47 hours, 4 electronic warfare drones climbed sharply to 1,200 meters, deliberately exposing themselves to the 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙞𝙝 radar. Simultaneously, they deployed corner reflectors, triangular aluminum structures that amplify radar returns by a factor of 100. The 𝙄𝙣𝙨 operator's screen erupted with priority alerts. His classification system identified 4 incoming cruise missiles, threat level maximum, range 47 kilometers, and closing at 380 kilometers per hour. His training took over. Cruise missiles always take priority. He had approximately 45 seconds to engage before they entered minimum range. His finger moved to the launch authorization button. What he didn't know was that the real threat was approaching from a completely different direction, flying at 85 meters altitude, using the terrain to mask their approach. While his missiles screamed toward the decoys, 8 𝙄𝙤𝙨-22 drones were already inside his defensive perimeter, invisible below his radar horizon. The 𝙄𝙤𝙨 missiles impacted the electronic warfare drones at 03:48 hours and 17 seconds. Massive explosions lit up the pre-dawn sky. The operator reported 4 confirmed kills. His commander congratulated him on the intercept. Neither man realized the attack had only just begun. The 𝙄𝙤𝙨-22 group had split into 2 formations. 4 drones vectored toward the Podlyot radar station near 𝙄𝙤𝙨. 4 more targeted the fuel storage complex serving 𝙄𝙤𝙨 Air Base. Navigation was being handled by advanced AI systems that used terrain recognition, comparing real-time camera footage to satellite imagery with 0.3-meter resolution. The Podlyot radar installation was Russia's primary early warning system for Crimea's southwestern sector. The massive phased array antenna could track 300 targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 600 kilometers. It was the eyes and ears of Crimea's air defense network. Destroying it would leave Russian forces blind across a 90-degree arc. At 03:52 hours, the lead 𝙄𝙤𝙨-22 acquired visual contact with the target. The distinctive pyramid-shaped radar housing was unmistakable, even in the darkness. The drone's targeting computer calculated the optimal impact point, the base of the antenna array where power distribution and cooling systems converged. The operator, sitting in a bunker 280 kilometers away, watched the crosshairs settle on target. His hand moved to the confirmation switch. 1 click. The drone's terminal guidance activated. No turning back now. The warhead struck at 03:53 hours and 41 seconds. 20 kilograms of RDX high explosive detonated on contact, sending a shaped charge through the radar's protective housing. The explosion severed primary power cables and ruptured coolant lines. Secondary explosions followed as backup generators overloaded and caught fire. Within 90 seconds, the Podlyot radar went completely offline. Russian Air Defense Command in Sevastopol immediately attempted to switch to backup systems, but the backup radar had been one of the units redeployed to the Arctic. The gap in coverage was catastrophic. Crimea's southwestern approaches were now completely unmonitored. 400 kilometers to the northeast, another crisis was developing. While Russian commanders frantically tried to restore radar coverage, the second 𝙄𝙤𝙨-22 formation was approaching 𝙄𝙤𝙨 Air Base, home to Russia's nuclear-capable aviation in Crimea. The base housed 5 operational aircraft, 3 Su-24 bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons, 1 Su-30SM multi-role fighter, and 1 Su-34 strike fighter. Satellite intelligence had identified them parked in reinforced shelters on the northern apron. But the drones weren't targeting the aircraft. They were targeting the fuel. 𝙄𝙤𝙨 Air Base maintained 2.4 million liters of jet fuel in 6 massive storage tanks located 400 meters from the main runway. Each tank held 400,000 liters of JP-8 aviation kerosene with a flash point of 60 degrees Celsius. The tanks were protected by earthen berms and equipped with foam fire suppression systems. The Ukrainian planners knew that destroying the tanks wouldn't be enough. They needed to create an inferno that would spread to the aircraft shelters and ammunition storage bunkers. At 03:56 hours, all 4 drones struck in sequence, spaced exactly 1.7 seconds apart. The first drone impacted Tank 3's access valve assembly, rupturing the main feed line. Pressurized fuel sprayed across the facility at 15 meters per second. The second drone struck Tank 4's ventilation system, igniting the fuel-air mixture inside. The explosion blew the tank's roof 80 meters into the air. The third and fourth drones hit simultaneously, targeting the pipeline junction that connected all 6 tanks. The combined explosions severed every connection, spilling 1.6 million liters of burning fuel across 12 hectares. The firestorm reached temperatures exceeding 1,400 degrees Celsius within minutes. The aircraft shelters, designed to withstand conventional bombs, couldn't survive sustained exposure to a fuel fire of this intensity. Reinforced concrete cracks at 600 degrees. Steel structural supports fail at 1,100 degrees. By 04:05 hours, all 3 Su-24 bombers were total losses. The Su-30SM suffered catastrophic damage. Only the Su-34, parked furthest from the fuel tanks, survived with repairable damage. Russia's nuclear-capable aviation in Crimea had been effectively eliminated. But the largest strike was still approaching. While fires raged at Saki and Podlyot, 12 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙞 Beaver drones were converging on 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙞𝙤, Crimea's primary logistics hub and the command center for all Russian operations in northern Crimea. 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙞𝙤 was heavily defended. Under normal circumstances, the base was protected by 2 S-400 batteries positioned in overlapping coverage zones, 3 Pantsir S-1 systems providing short-range protection, and a dedicated electronic warfare company operating multiple Krasuka-4 jamming vehicles. But circumstances were far from normal. The first S-400 battery had been deactivated 36 hours earlier, its systems already packed for Arctic deployment. The second battery was operating at reduced capacity, with only 2 of 4 launchers active due to maintenance issues. 1 Pantsir S-1 had departed for Greenland. The remaining 2 were being operated by reserve crews with less than 40% of the training hours of frontline units. The Krasuka-4 electronic warfare vehicles were still operational, but their crews were exhausted. They had been on heightened alert for 11 consecutive days due to increased Ukrainian drone activity. Fatigue was affecting decision-making and reaction times. At 03:58 hours, the Krasuka-4 systems detected electromagnetic emissions consistent with drone control signals. The operators activated their jamming systems, flooding all frequencies from 100 MHz to 18 GHz with 500 watts of directed interference. GPS signals died instantly. Radio communications went dark. Even military-grade encrypted channels were overwhelmed by the jamming. But the Ukrainian drones weren't using GPS or radio control. Each Beaver was equipped with a fiber-optic tethered control system for the initial approach phase, and advanced inertial navigation combined with terrain-matching AI for the terminal phase. The Krasuka's jamming was utterly irrelevant. The drones pressed on, completely unaffected. At 04:01 hours, the remaining S-400 battery achieved radar lock on 6 targets approaching from the northwest at 340 kilometers per hour. The battery commander authorized engagement. 248 N-6DM missiles launched from their tubes, accelerating to Mach 6 within seconds. The Ukrainian operators were ready for this. The moment the S-400 radar went into targeting mode, the drones executed a coordinated defensive maneuver. 6 drones dove sharply to 65 meters altitude, dropping below the radar horizon. 6 more climbed rapidly to 1,400 meters, deploying corner reflectors. The S-400's fire control radar lost track of the low-altitude group completely. It locked onto the high-altitude group, which now appeared to be much larger targets due to the reflectors. The missiles pursued the climbing drones with perfect accuracy, and that's exactly what the Ukrainians wanted. The missiles detonated among the high-altitude group at 0401 hours and 52 seconds. 3 drones were destroyed instantly. 3 more were damaged but continued flying on battery power and autonomous guidance. But the low-altitude group, the real strike package, was now inside 15 kilometers with no effective defenses remaining. The S-400 had expended its ready missiles and needed 90 seconds to reload. The Pantsir S-1 systems were slewing their guns toward the new contacts, but target acquisition takes time. Time they didn't have. At 0403 hours, 9 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙞𝙜𝙆 Beavers crossed the perimeter of 𝙤𝙤𝙨𝙝𝙆 Air Base at 90 meters altitude, traveling at 310 kilometers per hour. The base's automatic defense systems finally engaged. 2 Pantsir S-1 batteries opened fire with their twin 30mm autocannons, creating a wall of lead between the drones and their targets. The drones scattered in 3 dimensions. 3 jinked left, 3 right, 3 maintained course. This forced the Pantsir gunners to make split-second decisions about target priority. Human reaction time is 250 milliseconds. The drones were changing course every 180 milliseconds. The Pantsir gunners did their best. 1 drone disintegrated in a spectacular fireball 800 meters from the base perimeter. Another took shrapnel damage that severed its control surfaces, sending it tumbling into a field. 7 drones made it through. Their targets had been selected weeks in advance using satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and human sources inside Crimea. Target 1. The Base Operations Center, a reinforced building housing communications equipment, battle management systems, and senior command staff. Target 2. The ammunition storage complex containing artillery shells, missiles, and small arms ammunition. Target 3. The vehicle maintenance facility with 23 armored vehicles undergoing repair. At 0404 hours and 15 seconds, the first drone struck the operations center's roof. The 20-kilogram warhead punched through 2 layers of reinforced concrete before detonating inside the building's 3rd floor. The explosion collapsed the entire eastern wing, killing 8 personnel and wounding 14 others. Every computer system in the facility was destroyed. Communications went dark immediately. The 2nd and 3rd drones hit the ammunition storage complex simultaneously from different angles. The explosions triggered a chain reaction among stored munitions. For the next 40 minutes, secondary explosions would rock the base as shells, rockets, and missiles cooked off. The facility was a total loss. Drones 4 and 5 targeted the vehicle maintenance facility. The warheads ignited fuel and lubricants stored inside, creating a fire that consumed all 23 vehicles and collapsed the building's roof. Drones 6 and 7 struck the base's primary fuel depot, rupturing 3 storage tanks and igniting 600,000 liters of diesel fuel. By 0410 hours, 𝙤𝙤𝙨𝙝 Air Base was effectively non-operational. Fires burned out of control across multiple sectors. The command structure was in chaos. Communications with higher headquarters were severed. Ammunition continued to explode, preventing firefighting efforts. The base would remain offline for a minimum of 72 hours. Back in Moscow, as dawn broke on January 23rd, senior military leadership was receiving catastrophic damage reports from Crimea. The 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙝𝙆 radar, destroyed. 𝙄𝙤𝙨 Air Base, 5 aircraft lost, fuel infrastructure destroyed. 𝙤𝙤𝙨 Base, command center destroyed, ammunition depot lost, vehicle facility demolished. And all of it happened while Russian forces were being redeployed thousands of kilometers away to counter a perceived threat in Greenland. The strategic implications were immediate and severe. With the 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙝 radar offline, Crimea's southwestern approaches were unmonitored. Ukrainian aircraft and missiles could now operate in that sector with significantly reduced risk. The loss of 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙞𝙜𝙝 nuclear-capable bombers eliminated Russia's ability to project strategic air power from Crimea. The destruction of 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙝's logistics infrastructure would hamper Russian operations across northern Crimea for weeks. But perhaps the most significant impact was psychological. Ukraine had demonstrated once again that it could strike high-value targets deep inside occupied territory with precision and devastating effect. The myth of Crimea as an impregnable fortress had been shattered. Russian military analysts immediately began a post-strike assessment. How had Ukraine coordinated such a complex, multi-target operation with this level of precision? How had the drones penetrated air defenses that should have been impenetrable? The answer became clear within hours. The redeployment to Greenland had created temporary gaps in Crimea's air defense network. Ukrainian intelligence had detected these gaps, calculated the optimal strike window, and executed with surgical precision. The Greenland crisis, engineered by Trump's aggressive rhetoric, had served as the perfect distraction. While Russian commanders focused on the Arctic, Ukraine struck where it hurt most. In the days following the strike, NATO intelligence agencies analyzed the operation in detail. The level of coordination was remarkable. Drones launched from multiple locations at different times, flying different routes, had converged on their targets within a 20-minute window. Electronic warfare drones had successfully deceived Russian air defenses. Low-altitude penetration tactics had exploited radar blind spots. Terminal guidance had been precise enough to strike specific sections of buildings and infrastructure. This was not amateur hour. This was professional military operations at the highest level. For Ukraine, the operation delivered multiple strategic benefits. First, it degraded Russian military capabilities in Crimea significantly. Second, it demonstrated Ukraine's ability to conduct deep strikes with precision. Third, it forced Russia to reconsider its force deployments, potentially pulling more air defense assets away from frontline operations to protect rear-area targets. And fourth, it sent a clear message. Ukraine was not waiting for peace negotiations. Ukraine was prosecuting this war with increasing sophistication and effectiveness. Russian state media, predictably, downplayed the damage. Official reports acknowledged minor fires at military facilities in Crimea, but claimed all attacks had been repelled with minimal damage. Satellite imagery told a different story. The smoke plumes from 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙞𝙝 could be seen from space. The destruction at 𝙄𝙣𝙨𝙝 was extensive and undeniable. Independent analysts estimated the total damage at over $400 million in destroyed infrastructure, aircraft, and munitions. The operational impact, the loss of radar coverage, the degradation of logistics capabilities, the destruction of nuclear-capable bombers, was incalculable. For approximately $850,000 in drone systems, Ukraine had inflicted devastating damage on one of Russia's most important military assets. The operation also highlighted the effectiveness of Ukraine's domestic drone industry. The 𝙄𝙣𝙨 Beaver and 𝙄𝙣-22 airborne systems are Ukrainian-designed and manufactured. They incorporate Western components, but are fundamentally Ukrainian innovations. The fiber optic control systems, the AI-assisted navigation, the sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities, all developed by Ukrainian engineers and operators. This represents a fundamental shift in the war's dynamics. Ukraine is no longer dependent solely on Western weapon systems. It is producing its own advanced military technology and using it with devastating effectiveness. As Russian forces in Greenland dug into Arctic positions, preparing for a confrontation that would never come, the real war continued thousands of kilometers to the south. And in that war, Ukraine was proving once again that innovation, precision, and audacity can overcome numerical superiority. The Crimean strikes of January 23, 2026, will be studied in military academies for decades. They represent a masterclass in exploiting enemy vulnerabilities, coordinating complex operations across multiple domains, and executing precision strikes against heavily defended targets. But for the Ukrainian operators who planned and executed the mission, it was simply another day in a war that has demanded constant innovation and relentless pressure. They identified a window of opportunity created by Russia's distraction with Greenland. They planned meticulously. They executed flawlessly. And when Russian commanders finally realized what had happened, the damage was already done. The fires were already burning. The aircraft were already destroyed. The radar was already offline. The message was unmistakable. Crimea is not safe. Russia's occupation is not secure. And Ukraine's ability to strike deep behind enemy lines is only getting more sophisticated. As smoke continued to rise from multiple locations across occupied Crimea throughout January 23rd, Russian military leadership faced an uncomfortable truth. The redeployment to Greenland had been a strategic error. Resources desperately needed to defend against Ukrainian strikes had been sent thousands of kilometers away to counter a threat that was more political theater than military reality. Trump's rhetoric about Greenland had been just noise, but Ukraine's drones? Those were very, very real. And they had just erased some of Russia's most critical military infrastructure in Crimea, proving once again that in modern warfare, precision and intelligence matter more than raw numbers. The war continues. But after January 23, 2026, the dynamics in Crimea had fundamentally changed. Russia's defensive posture had been severely compromised. Ukraine's offensive capabilities had been dramatically demonstrated. And the world had witnessed what happens when a determined defender exploits every opportunity, no matter how small. Thank you for watching.